It's great when you pretty much run your own thing. You can't get canceled. This is season five of the Hall of Fame show. Kirk Buchner, Evan Nolan, special guest. I think it'll actually go this way. The way I'm not even sure because it all messes me up every time I sort of
If
like
you're there
this
and
way
I'm
and then
here,
you show
the
this
Paul's
way on the
there, and
video. I don't know, but Paul Lawrence is here. And we have him here because we are doing another episode of the Hall of Fame show. But of course, if we're going to talk folks on the Pro Football Hall of Fame, you got to get somebody who's tagged as the Pro Football Hall of Fame Canton guy or PF Canton guy.
You got it. The FHO Canton guy. That's me.
I'd eventually remember. I tweet you all the time, but it's not like I actually remember what I just type in P and then bang, you come up automatically.
Yep, there it is.
So there it is. Amazingly though, when I hit number 2, then other things come up other than secondhand burrito. I don't know why that is.
I know. I mean,
I don't know.
I'm surprised I'm still on Twitter after all this time. I signed up with that. As people who may not know, I signed up with that handle because I figured, like a secondhand burrito, nobody would want my opinions. And now it's like 14 years later, I'm still on. I've been on Twitter for a long time. I've been like all the social networks for a long time. I was one of the first, like, probably 1,000 non-Harvard students on Facebook. So, because I was dating a student at Harvard, and when you started Facebook, you had to have a university address. So a college address is the only way you could get on. So I was dating her. She invited me. I know what the hell it was, and that was 2003. Wow. So I'm probably 20 years on Facebook at this point, which is insane. So
like one wife and 6 girlfriends ago.
At least 3 girlfriends and 1 wife. I've been married to I met my wife in 2006. So
yeah,
I didn't go through girlfriends that fast.
After a while, they just sort of all blend in.
Yeah. So anyway,
especially in my case because they're all Asian. But anyway,
So I know we're going to be talking about the big topic we're going to talk about. Can I interrupt for a second?
Of course.
We had unprecedented change for coaches in football over like an 18-hour period. We had Nick Saban decide to retire. Hey, Mike Krzyzewski, you don't need a whole going away tour when you decide to retire. You could just, retire. We had then Pete Carroll left Seattle, and then Bill Belichick left New England, which is an unprecedented amount of coach greatness that all changed over at one point, which is very, very interesting. I just thought is a good time to take, I honestly think this is probably the best coach free agency class we've ever had in the NFL at this point. I can't think of a better one.
Well, I don't think Nick Saban's going to
no, Nick Saban's not. I think Nick Saban's done, but Belichick, Carroll, Vrabel, Harbaugh is looking like he's coming out there. It's an interesting class. So figure we take a second.
It could be interesting. Now, I guess on the plus side, with Belichick sort of being one of the free agents, he's not going to message one of the other free agents and make them think that they've landed a job.
Yeah, well, he's going to message Pete Carroll and congratulate him on no. So.
No, that is very much an end of an era.
Yeah, definitely. But I heard Bill Simmons had a whole thing today with Lombardi, and he was talking about how Belichick should go to the Chargers, or the Chargers apparently in on Harbaugh. But Lombardi brought up, why not Carroll to the Chargers? If anyone owns Southern California, it's Pete Carroll. And with that quarterback, that'd be an interesting combination. I don't know. I think the Chargers, if I were any of these coaches, the Chargers are the team I'd go for. But what do I know? So
I think if I'm one of these coaches, I wait till at least after this round of playoffs.
Of course. Yeah.
Because if there's an upset, somebody's out, then you've got an option to think about a team who's obviously further along than perhaps the Chargers and the Panthers and some other of these teams are, right? And teams who might have a decent quarterback. So I would think, and they maybe even wait till after the next round, because we all know, right? There's going to be some team who has high aspirations, right? Who's going to lose either this weekend or next. And there's an owner who's going to not be very happy. There are few of them.
If the Cowboys lose to the Packers, I could totally. Mike McCarthy, I can totally see losing. The
I can
Bills,
see, I can see Jerry Jones calling Mike into his office a Monday morning at 8 a.m. and firing his ass. And 9 p.m. here have Bill Belichick on a plane. That Jerry will do that if this is what's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but if it does, you're absolutely right. And think of some of his other teams, right? There's some other scenarios.
I mean, how about the
that
Bills?
are very attractive, to a guy like Bill Belichick, who wants to stay in the game, and he wants to be with a winning team so that he can break Don Shula's record in more than 4 or 5 seasons, which it might take if he goes to a place. But the Chargers is another good opportunity. But I wouldn't be in a rush if I'm any of these guys that we're talking about.
Agreed. I mean, the Bills are another team. If they lose, maybe might do it. But the places they've been saying Belichick and everyone, why would he go to Washington?
No,
I mean, that doesn't make any sense. This was one of the ones. Atlanta, maybe, but they don't have a quarterback either. I don't think he wants to go someplace. Like, they got a ton of talent, but they have no quarterback. So, I mean, the Chargers are the team I'd pick of what's available now. But yeah, if Dallas, it wouldn't shock me if Dallas becomes available that one of those 3 guys or Harbaugh, one of those 4 ends up in Dallas if the Packers beat the Cowboys. So,
and all 3 people were talking, well, 2 anyway, we're future Pro Football Hall of Fame inductees, first time when they're eligible for sure.
Yeah.
Pete Carroll's not in the College Hall yet, is he? I don't remember.
Don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I have 51 tabs open for people who died. I'm not calling them. If I open them one more time.
Well, let's get into why we brought Paul here. I think I brought you here last time when we did this, or maybe it was for something else. But we are going to look at what I consider a huge elevator up for virtually anyone, not everyone, but who gets this honor. The first team APL pros are out, and as Paul and I were discussing before he came on, Evan, obviously there's different all pros, but this is generally considered the gold standard and the one that is usually most referenced when you talk about first team all pros. While Pro Football Reference, for example, does acknowledge other all pros on their sort of tabs or their tables, that's what they're going to like put. If they'll put the AP1 or the AP2. So I thought what we do is we go through each one of them, except for the special teams, because I don't think it's going to make a difference for any one of them. So we're just going to bypass them. Vinny, if you're watching, I'm sorry, buddy. I love you, but we're bypassing the special teams guys because realistically,
literally the only person whose special teams could have helped is Matthew Slater. Yeah. If Matthew Slater got yet another All Pro, but he already has the most. But if he's like got 12, or I think he's 9 now, he's 10 now. If you got 11 or 12 or whatever, it helps him. Other than that, it does not matter.
Not at this stage for any of the other people. So the kicker, the punter, the returners, the long snapper. I don't think we'll ever see a long snapper in the Hall of Fame, but that's neither here nor there. We are going to start with the glory position. Go ahead.
If you want me to make the case on Vinny makes a case for Joe Cardona, you let me know. Or who's the guy from the Bears who's there forever?
Vinny's been doing a phenomenal job on this.
Yeah.
I've got to say, changing lives.
Yeah, but who's the guy for the Bears who's there forever? Do you remember, Paul? He's like the longest.
No, I know who you mean, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
He's in the media here and beloved, but I can't think of his name. Anyway, continue, Kirk. I interrupted you.
Oh no, all good. So
fifth season, same interruptions.
Yeah. Well, not much is going to change, nor should it. Quarterback Lamar Jackson. I had him ranked at number 30 in my preseason ranking of active players. Obviously, that would sort of go up as this will go. I don't think he's going to be an MVP this year, but it's interesting with quarterbacks. They're judged on a completely different metric. And if Baltimore wins the Super Bowl.
Wait, you don't think Jackson's going to win MVP?
I don't know. I think it's possible. I think it's possible that they might look at McCaffrey or Tyreek Hill. I think Lamar should, but no, I don't know for sure.
Paul, do you think Lamar Jackson's an MVP?
Yeah, I think. I mean, and Vegas would tend to agree with me. Look at the betting odds.
Okay. Let's say.
I mean, personally, I mean, I would have no problem. I think he's had a solid year, but and again, no offense to him, the type of player he is, but when I look at quarterbacks as MVP, he's not. He doesn't have the passing numbers. And again, I understand it's the debate about how the role of quarterbacks changes. And MVP isn't really a quarterback as much as it is you are the most valuable player, and he is the best player who's had the best season on what I think we would agree at this point, at least coming out of the regular season, is the best team overall. So, okay, kudos to that. I mean, I think there's probably an argument. I would make the argument for Christian McCaffrey, but again, I think part of the problem that he faces, of course, is his fellow teammate, the quarterback Brock Purdy, is going to get some votes take away from him. Plus, the MVP has turned into a quarterback award. I don't think it should be, but it really has, and so the emphasis leans that way. If it's going to lean that way, and Lamar Jackson and he's first team All-Pro quarterback, it seems to be setting up for that.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where he might win MVP, and then you have somebody else win Offensive Player of the Year, like separately.
That's exactly
which is always weird to me when that happens. But it wouldn't shock me if he was MVP and then McCaffrey was Offensive Player of the Year.
I think you're absolutely right.
Split it that way.
I do think, though, that if the season plays out the way it looks like it could, let's say Baltimore wins the Super Bowl. Now you get 2 MVPs if he does win that second one, like you're both predicting. 2-time champion. I don't see at that point that's enough for me personally. Whether it is for a lot of the other voters, I don't know.
He will already have a better resume other than passing yards than Eli Manning. So,
absolutely, and we've always said when we looked at Eli, was Eli ever? I think you said that first before I did, Evan.
Yeah.
Was Eli ever in the top 5 quarterbacks in the league?
And any single season of his career.
Yeah,
he was top 10. But was he ever definitely top 5? And he only had, and again, as a Patriots fan, he had only 2 years he won any playoff games. He just happened to go all the way both those years. So.
Well, we can all look forward to, I think, probably maybe around 10, 11 p.m. Eastern time on February 8th, as soon as this class is officially announced on the NFL Honor Show, the debate will open and we will get to spend the next 12 months because Eli Manning will be first year eligible for the 2025 class. And that will be the topic du jour, overwhelming social media and talk radio. Whenever they talk about that class over the next year, we're going to hear a volume about Eli Manning. So buckle up.
Eli and Tiki for 2025. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
But, getting back to what you were saying earlier, Kurt, a second MVP award, Associated Press, if he gets that award, every other player who has 2 AP NFL MVP awards is in the Hall of Fame, or will be. There's a few that aren't really eligible yet, but we can assume
Brady and Mahomes are getting it.
Yeah. So you're right, Kurt. I mean, he might have an average career from here on out, right? He might, who knows how much longer, or maybe he adds to those accolades. But even if he has a, say, average career and gets to 10, 11, 12 years, he's going to have those credentials. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, because this is also too, which I think is so important for most of these, not everyone really, that I think we're going to be talking about. When you're on this list, you're considered the best at your position. Obviously, there's a little bit of a deviation, especially when we get to the wide receivers. I think there was clearly one first team All-Pro, but there was 2 others who can say that they are, and that we have to sort of acknowledge. I guess we talked about him earlier, so we're just going to go in order of the position. So we got Christian McCaffrey, an incredible season, could be, and Evan, I agree with you. It is sort of interesting that the MVP and the Offensive Player of the Year are different, but that's probably what could happen. If it's not McCaffrey, it could be Tyreek. McCaffrey, well, he pretty much saved my ass in fantasy, I'll say that, but that's not what really wins you a Hall of Fame spot. But this has been his best year since the first time he led the league in yards from scrimmage, sorry. I said also, too, in our chat group, that this might have been the first time ever that in my lifetime, that there was not one active player who looked like, active running back, sorry, who looked like they were destined to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
McCaffrey now, could he be that guy?
Yeah, again, I think he's he's building a resume, right? And of course, depending how the 49ers do, again, like many of the guys, the Super Bowl would certainly help with that, or an MVP award. Running backs are kind of an odd mix, right? If you go back and look over the years, Derrick Henry, we've talked a little bit about him, right? So he got one vote this year. I was actually looking at the vote counts for these two. And there's a guy we've talked about. Again, he didn't make this first team, but they built, it's rare for these guys to build up a kind of career, because we've talked a lot about the change in the position. I don't know about you guys, but running backs, there's fewer and fewer of them getting 1,000 yards. This was not, I don't think, a great season per se for running backs. Again, the game has changed and their role has changed, but even with that, right, we would expect maybe 2 or 3 guys to kind of elevate at a very high level. And just looking at the stats this year, you sort of have McCaffrey, and again, he's a level above because of the other skill set he brings. But then you look down at the running backs, it's kind of a drop off and a bunch of guys in the middle. So here's a question for both of you, if you want to, because I didn't know the answer, and I'm willing to admit it. Who received the second most? Don't look. Who received the second most votes for running back after Christian McCaffrey?
My guess is going to be Derrick Henry.
I can't think of any other one that makes more sense than that either. Yeah.
So all three of us, because I didn't know this, illustrates the point I just made, because it was Kyron Williams for the Rams, who had 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns. Again, really good season for a running back.
Yeah.
But that's the drop off. And then a couple other guys got votes. Henry got one further down. So a bunch of those guys around there. But it just shows you not only the skills, the elevation that McCaffrey brings to the game, but that running backs just are not as dominant across the league as, and we know this has been going on for a while, but it's kind of striking when you see something like that.
Yeah, and this is why Frank Gore is going to get the Hall of Fame, no matter what. He said we're going to get to the point. I don't know if he's going to be first ballot. We're going to get to the point, though. He's so far ahead of everybody else who's retired. It just doesn't matter. You can't not put him in.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to wide receivers. This is my favorite player to watch. Just to watch, and it's Tyreek Hill. He's one of the few people that when I look at him play, I feel like he is, pardon the pun, I guess, a leaps ahead of everyone else. It just feels that way to me. Second straight 1,700 yard year, proved he could do that without Patrick Mahomes, made people talk about Tua as an MVP. Tua's not an MVP, but he makes Tua look a lot better than he is. It's not a shot at Tua. Tua's a good quarterback, but Tyreek Hill makes him, just takes him to another level. This will be his 5th first-team All-Pro, albeit the first one he got was as a returner, so there is a bit of something that we do have to remember. But he's already an all-decade player, which is interesting that that's already the case for Tyreek. I can't see when he has a year like this and a stretch like this and a 2-year run where he proved he does not need the best quarterback of our generation to be this good. Mm-hmm. The narrative for me, I have him in right now. I really do. And now, total wise, he's like at 10,000 yards, which isn't enough normally. But we're going to be talking about Marshawn Lynch pretty soon, and he's not exactly at the top tier either when it comes to just the compiling of actual yards. Marshawn was also a difference maker when he played. More so,
I think Richard Sherman would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I have Tyreek fully in. I'm looking at that right now where he stands with everybody else, but he's certainly building a very, very good case. And he has a really good opportunity this weekend to stick it to the Chiefs.
He does.
In a very, very cold Kansas City. By the way, plenty of good seats available. You can get seats for the game for $38 to the Dolphins. Yeah, it's going to be -30.
Yeah.
Incidentally, as we're all doing this, as we're trying to figure this out, like I'm in Winnipeg, which is pretty goddamn cold, but I'm not the one snowed in. Evan is. Paul in Ohio is worried about whether the power is going to stay on. So, hey, global warming, what the hell?
So looking here, Tyreek he's got 4 AP. Yeah, he's 5 AP.
This is number 5.
First. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 Pro Bowls in 8 years.
Yeah.
which is pretty good. He's got over 10,000 yards receiving now, 76 touchdowns. Yeah, he's getting pretty darn close.
Yeah, and for me, as I've said a lot, I'm huge on that. Even if it's like only a 2-year period, but if you're a 2-year period at the best at what you do, and you're elevating other people around you, that's pretty big to me. The Hall of Fame has elected people for less than that.
And I think in this case, it's also intriguing because I looked at him, last year when he was selected, but going into that season, the 2022 season, interested to see how he would perform. So you have a guy who's not only provided that, like you mentioned, Kurt, at a high level for a number of years, he's now done it with 2 different teams, 2 different quarterbacks. And, some people wondered, would he be able to keep up that same kind of level of production?
He's better.
Not having Mahomes, nothing to say wrong with Tuna, but he has. And it's pretty impressive because a lot of guys, receivers, just can't make that. They may still have good careers, but to be able to have that high level for so long across 2 teams is pretty impressive. Wide receivers, when you look at some of them in the Hall of Fame, it's kind of interesting because sometimes it's just a big numbers, right? It's like the Randy Moss and the T.O. and of course Jerry Rice's numbers are like absurd, but and guys like Chris Carter and some others are up there. So it's a numbers thing, 1,000 receptions right over. And when you look at those guys, what's interesting is, again, Rice being the noted exception here. For the other guys, a lot of them don't have a tremendous amount of first team all-pro selections. Mm-hmm. And so a guy like this having that many, even though maybe in his career he doesn't get to, say, again, it's just a benchmark, 900 or 1,000 receptions, he's going to have a pretty impressive resume. Mm-hmm. Hard for the voters to kind of, no matter how the rest of his career plays out, and maybe doesn't have the kind of, top 10 all time kind of numbers. Some of the receivers we're talking about in the Hall right now are being way too many of them being discussed simply based on large numbers inflated since the 2000s. But they're gonna, it's gonna be hard for the voters. I think he's very close.
So I'm looking at his career numbers on. I mean, again, we're using Pro Football Reference. We talked about this on Monday when we were putting our Hall in. They have Football References, a Hall of Fame monitor, which is got its pluses and minuses, right? But they're comparables for him at this stage of his career. So career numbers versus other people's career numbers. Overall, his comparables where he is now without, and again, this actually is only through the end of last year. So this year hasn't even been included in this yet. Are Sterling Sharp, Antonio Freeman, Jordy Nelson, Gino Cappelletti, Bob Hayes, Joe Horn, Herman Moore, Wes Welker, Chris Collinsworth, Antonio Brown. So Bob Hayes is a Hall of Famer. We've talked about Sharp. I've talked about Gino a lot. And Antonio Brown, if he didn't blow his career, is probably right up there. But that's where his career numbers now, through 7 seasons. When you look at his year 7, the people he's closest to, Bob Hayes, James Lofton, Torrey Holt, Julio Jones, Terrell Owens, Randy Moss, Calvin Johnson, Chad Ochocinco, Roddy White, Sterling Sharp. So we're talking like through 7 seasons, he's on a Hall of Fame path. If he's retired today, he's probably not quite there. So, but he has a legitimate shot. 5 All-Pros in 8 years and 8 Pro Bowls in 8 years. That's pretty darn good for a wide receiver in this day and age. So
I think the only thing that can stop him is him.
Yeah, injuries is the one thing, right? That
I'm more referring to other things.
Or Tua throwing across the middle and getting him killed. That last game against the Bills, like he was just trying to get Tyreek knocked out for that playoff game.
Because you're right. I mean, he's young enough that any natural decline in his skill set that we might expect to see is not coming soon. Mm-hmm. If he stays healthy, the game is really geared towards wide receivers, building big numbers, right? And he's in a system with a good quarterback. So I think we would expect in the next few years, he's going to be continuing at a fairly high level and just add to those numbers if he stays healthy. In the way the game is played today, he can really compile even some average seasons. Really would push him up in the career numbers, in 2 or 3 more years. And you're right, if he stays healthy and continues to produce, then we're talking about some pretty significant historical numbers to get him up to the kind of names you mentioned. Yeah, that's very possible.
He needs, honestly, Kirk, he needs 200. If he gets 283 more receptions careers, he's probably Hall of Famer because he's at 717 career receptions. He gets to 1,000 you get 1,000 with 10,000 yards already receiving. He's got 72 touchdowns. 100 is clearly within reach if he gets 200 or 200 to 300 more receptions. He has 100, 100, and 100, 1,000, and 10,000. He's in.
Yeah, I guess I'm just putting more of a premium on just that level of dominance. I guess sort of my Terrell Davis argument. That's not neither here nor there. Now, this one has never been on my radar, and shame on me for that. But I don't know if he still should be. 8 Pro Bowls. This is his first team All Pro, but only because they decided to bother giving them to a fullback. Kyle Juszczyk. I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing that right. So I don't know what this does for him. Obviously, he's the best fullback in football, but who am I comparing him to?
Lorenzo Neal, and Lorenzo Neal's not getting close.
No, but right now.
Yeah, there is.
So,
which is interesting because, there are, as we've talked about, right, there's several other entities or groups that will announce their own All Pro. In fact, the NFL Players Association for the second year in a row just announced theirs. PFF announced theirs, which is all data analytic driven. We're going to hear from Sporting News, and Pro Football Writers Association is another one. Some of these no longer even select a fullback. Some of them, actually, the AP has 3 wide receiver just for our veteran.
Oh yeah,
so
I went.
Hill was number in the first. They actually have 3 on their first team. So it was Hill, CeeDee Lamb, and Ramaran from Brown from the Lions. So good.
Yeah,
good
my apologies, guys. I had that written down and then I just went right back to.
But the fullback, it's the AP is sort of just stuck with it because, and I'm looking on here, and only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys got votes. I'm assuming. Well, I know a few of the teams have running fullbacks, but they're probably the only 5 who played a fair amount of offensive to actually people to see them enough to say, well, I'm going to put a vote in for him. That just shows you it's just not a position that gets a lot of attention. And yeah, guys like we've talked about a bunch of fullbacks, even back in the 90s, who Daryl Johnson and Mike Alstott and some others who just aren't getting a whiff by the voters. And that's not going to get any better, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm looking at this. He's not on my radar. He's not on my list only because I don't see them ever doing this. Can I acknowledge that he's pretty much the best at what he does? Yeah, but again, who am I comparing him to?
Yeah.
So let's.
And wait, do you want to go back to CeeDee Lamb because we got interrupted there?
Because there's the 2 wide receivers. All I was really going to say here is it's just too soon in their career for CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown for us to even have a discussion. Obviously, that's a step in the right direction. More so for I think Lamb than Brown at this point, who I think is the better receiver and has the bigger upside, I think. But getting it this early doesn't really move them up the rank at this point. It's just they're just too young in their career, as we'll say a lot, especially when we get to the safeties, or in some of the corners. Tight end is interesting to me. I think Travis Kelce's era of dominance is over. I don't know if he's ever going to get another first team All Pro. Age catches up to all of us. He's 34 now, I believe. George Kittle, though, he's 30, I believe. So this is his second first team All Pro. I think that was really interesting for me, and because I wasn't watching a lot of Detroit earlier. Sam Laporta, I feel like this season went 5 more games, he would have been the first team. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Sam Laporta should probably be the offensive rookie of the year, in my opinion. I know he may not get it, but he had 84 catches on that Lions team. The Lions are in serious trouble this weekend because Laporta's out. Like, he is their short yardage guy. He is the guy that can count on when you need 4 yards. Laporta is the guy they're going to. It's important as Amon-Ra St. Brown is. I mean, it's great for Laporta. He's a rookie. and he's second team all pro, which is fantastic for him. But I'm worried about that. I so want the Lions. I just turned 45 last week. The last time the Lions won a playoff game, I was 11. Like, I'd like them to have a shot. And of course, of all the teams in all the world, they have the one with their ex-quarterback coming into Detroit, Matthew Stafford, with a chance to finally win a playoff game in Detroit, and their major offensive guys out. So Laporta, I think this is a great start for him. But Kittle gets a couple more of these, which I think is possible. He's got to be in that the tight end conversation when we get to the Hall of Fame coming up. For him, it's going to be 10.
Especially if Kelsey, his peak is over. And I don't know that it is.
I think it is.
Well, you never know. There's always that Taylor magic.
Well, Kelsey's been spending a lot of energy off the field, apparently.
Yeah. I don't.
I've said this before.
And I don't blame him one bit, actually.
That next year, that album is called My Other Tight End. You watch.
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear Kelsey was not close to the same player this year he's been in years past. So Kittle has the title for now. Laporta, presuming he comes back from his injury, has the inside track on the next stop. I mean, Mark Andrews is someone who we talk about a lot for this. Andrews got injured early. He was actually activated today from the injured reserve.
Oh, was he?
So
okay.
he's gonna be out and available, which is very good for who we think is gonna be the future MVP and very good for Baltimore's chances. But yeah, I think we're kind of at the end of that group of wide receivers, or not wide receivers, tight ends, and there's an opening. I mean, we basically went Gonzalez, Gates, Gronkowski, Kelsey. There's kind of a gap. Kittle is the last. He's in his third, like you said, early 30s now. He's got a couple more years. Laporta may be the heir apparent.
Looks like it very well could be. And
Yep.
good on him if it is. Moving on to the O-line. This is sort of, I grew up hating the Niners. I don't know why. I think just as a child growing up in the 80s, I hated all the really good teams. Just you root for the underdog. Maybe that's why I gravitated to the Saints, who at that point had never had a winning season yet, but c'est la vie. Left tackle, if San Francisco wins, I'm happy for him the most. And that's someone who might have done everything he needs to do at this point. Trent Williams, 11th Pro Bowl this year, third straight first team All-Pro. Did so after betting on himself, had to lose a year because of being misdiagnosed in Washington. And the amazing thing is that's not even the top 10 worst things under the Dan Snyder watch in Washington. I can't help but cheer for this guy. I want him to hoist that Lombardi trophy. If that's sort of the way it goes for the Niners, I just love his story. Has he done enough? Because notoriously, O-lineman, it's hard.
Yeah, so it's gonna be tough. I was posting some on Twitter about this today, right? I mean, he's most of his career was played in the 2010s. And the challenge he's gonna face is he didn't make that all-decade team. And so he has, I think of many of the players here, I think I maybe highlighted this before, that I think he, as you mentioned, Kurt, this 3 consecutive first team All-Pro kind of towards the tail end of his career has really moved him up that list. So it's going to give him a much more serious opportunity when the voters begin to look at his case. Now, of course, Joe Thomas is already in, so that's one of those tackles from the 2010s. But, we've got Jason Peters, we have Tyrone Smith, right? We have Joe Stanley, who I think who probably has the least of the best opportunities. You have Andrew Whitworth kind of in that mix of another level down. I'm just suggesting that is the voters, and these guys, of course, are going to come in waves. Some of them are still playing, obviously. A couple of these guys are. So the voters, though, are going to face some dilemma, and I can see them having a bit of a logjam to kind of figure out. But I do think, of looking at this team and saying who has really helped their case. I think we talked about George Hill as being one of them. I think Trent Williams is another, that he's setting a stage and now he's putting himself in the conversation, because multiple first team All-Pro plus an All-Decade is kind of what gets offensive linemen, including tackles, in, and there are a fair number in the Hall, but there's not a lot. And once you get past like the third or fourth best one, most decades they don't elect more. So he's going to be in that, I guess, kind of bubble area, and I think he's only improving his case.
Yeah, so we have him. So the Pro Football Hall of Fame monitor again has him right ahead of Willie Anderson and right behind Andrew Whitworth, not counting this season. So with another first team All Pro and another Pro Bowl, that's it's going to be what, his 12th Pro Bowl.
This is 11.
This is 11.
Yeah.
So that's going to jump him probably up right below Richmond Webb. So we're talking he'd be passing Whitworth, Covert, Lomas Brown, Joe Staley, Dan Deerdorf, Dick Shaffrith, excuse me. And then we're right up at Richmond Webb, Joe Jacoby area. So I mean he's getting in the right place. He's currently 27th. But he'd be right in the Joe Jacoby, Richmond Webb, Tony Baselli, Orlando Pace, Jason Peters area of this whole thing. So he's getting to the point where this is getting close. He has one more season like this. He's going to be a semifinalist multiple times at least.
Of course, two of the guys you mentioned aren't even in the Hall of Fame, so it does show that dilemma on top that he's in the mix. And but yeah, it's incredible that he's been able to do this. And I agree with Kurt. I mean, I think he jumped ship, got out of a franchise that was going nowhere and was a disaster, and found a good place to land. And there are people who say, and maybe this heresy is, he is one of the best athletes on that Niners team. And one of the key players in it. And so it's kudos for him.
Yeah.
Left guard, we got Joe Thuney. He's
Finally a
31.
Patriot. Said finally a Patriot. Sorry.
Well, sure.
Yeah, he used to be. So.
Yeah, but age 31, so he's.
I was gonna say closest thing we got. No All Pros, no Pro Bowlers for the Patriots this year. So,
well, this is his first that he ever received this honor. And you mentioned a name earlier, Paul, and Andrew Whitworth. Andrew Whitworth's second half of his career is what could get him into the Hall of Fame. His first half was decent, so it's not impossible for someone to put your Hall of Fame resume as a lineman at age 31. It's hard, but it's not impossible. And this is a step towards that.
Thuney has what? 3 Super Bowl rings? 4 Super Bowl rings?
I don't know.
He definitely has 2 with the Patriots, at least.
He was with Kansas City last year, so he would have 1 there.
Yeah, there's 1 there. I think he may have 3. It's 2016 to 2023. So he just missed the first Super Bowl, or the 4th Super Bowl for the Pats, I think.
I think the only caveat we need to put on that is the voters, and I'm going to get on my soapbox here, the voters treat guards like a piece of crap. They really disrespect the position. Not
as much as
I mean, if you're an all-time great, and there obviously are a number of them, with guys like Larry Allen and some others, they just at that level, okay, fine. But there are a lot of very good deserving players, as there are other positions, those other very deserving player just below that top tier all time are getting in the Hall. Guards have one hell of a time. Alan Faneca, 6-time first team All Pro. I think he had 9 Pro Bowls. It took him 6 years as a finalist get in the Hall of Fame, all decade, first team all decade. And when I saw that, I'm like, what in the world are voters doing when it comes to respect the guard position? So that's the only caveat, is the way the voters are acting, and I think it's getting a little bit better, but you really need to build accolades at this position. And let's hope he can do some more, because they're brutal when it comes to evaluating and frankly disrespecting, in my view, the position. There's probably voters out there that don't agree with me, but the evidence clearly shows us that they often don't give them as much value.
To be fair with Faneca would have gotten in a year earlier if they hadn't put Bill Cowher in
Yeah.
As the coach. It got to the
Still
point.
that's 6 years for a guy who's six-time
Yeah.
first team
But
All-Pro. At any other position, we wouldn't even be, it wouldn't be a discussion. But here he is, waiting and waiting and waiting, and I know there's some other factors at play there, but it's just kind of appalling.
yeah, except center. Center is the actual one where they treat you like
Yeah,
crap.
that's even worse. We'll get to that one.
Until the center
Until-
we've got now, and I've been on record. I will maintain this. This is your next center getting into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Still active. I don't know for how long. In our group, Brian Fry said that he thinks that this was a legacy pick. He might be onto something. So I asked who he would have went with. He went with Frank Ragnow. But it's Jason Kelsey with number 6. And I think what also is going to help him, right after he's done playing, he's going to be in the booth.
Yeah.
I really think so. And we've seen how that helps. If you are in the public eye and you're sort of like talking to those same people all the time, again, it's always the same thing. It's people voting on people, and in many cases, people voting on people they know. What, like, you would probably know this because you've got your spreadsheet there, Evan. I don't know if you have it out. Even if you don't, maybe you know this off the top of your head, or maybe Paul does. I was trying to think, when's the last time a center was even a semifinalist?
I can pull
Sure
that.
the answer to that.
I can pull that for you.
Okay.
It's been a while.
Yeah. So
yeah,
Jason had a good enough year. His profile is just expanding. I said when I did something with Chris, where we did sort of the year elevator, and I had him as my elevator up, and I said to him, when is the last time you saw any lineman, period, let alone at center, who was the face of commercials? I mean, yes, being the potential brother-in-law of Taylor Swift certainly helps, but okay, you play with the cards you're dealt, and he's charismatic. People in Philadelphia love him, and Philadelphia doesn't necessarily love people that easily.
Well, and then you have the tush push, right, which is all the vogue.
Mm-hmm.
It's a key part of that. So there's all that buzz on that business, which NFL more likely, I suspect, will outlaw that in the off season. But yeah, I think one of the things that comes up with all pro teams are sort of things that you can see every year in terms of like kind of trends and how you look at the players. And clearly we'll see cases, I think, of reputation selections of guys who are still playing at a high level. Younger guys probably even more so, but not yet well known or having the attention or playing on a team that's doesn't have quite as much success or notoriety. And I think it's fair to say, I mean, I haven't looked at the grading where he falls out, but if somebody wants to make this suggestion that maybe reputation got him in, I'd say that's probably a fair opinion, and it happens.
Yeah. By the way, it's Kevin Mawai in 2019. Yeah. We haven't had any since Mawai.
Mawai, didn't he play a lot of other positions in the O-line too?
He did. He's the all-decade center from the 2000s.
Okay.
So,
yeah, because I was just trying to make sure I had that right.
Here's a question: Who's the other all-decade center from the 2000s? Who's the second team?
Is it the guy from the Steelers?
No, he's 20. So Pouncey's 2010s. DeMonte Dawson's the 1990s. So it's Olin Kreutz of the Bears who has not sniffed anything.
No,
the 2010s are Pouncey and Alex Mack, neither of whom have sniffed anything. So
because there are what?
And neither will Saturday or Mangold.
Only 8 or 9 what we would consider modern centers who didn't flip around between positions like a guy like Bruce Matthews did. Right. There's only, same as tight ends, right? There's only, I always get the two mixed up. One's 8, one's 9, but there's not a lot of them.
I think it's 8 centers and 9 tight ends.
Something, yeah.
Right. And tight ends used to be 5 until very recently.
Yeah, and we know we're going to get a whole run on tight ends in the next decade.
We're not getting a run on centers.
Correct.
No.
Okay, so this, Paul, is right up your alley. I kind of really want your take on this one, being a Dallas guy. So you mentioned earlier how guards get no love, but this one is piling up the accolades. Yeah. It's right guard Zach Martin. This is also his 6th first team All-Pro.
7th.
It's a 7th? Oh, okay, I got that wrong. I apologize. 7th. All right, so even better. Like, I don't know. Well, I mean, they made Faneca wait, sort of the same deal, but then Faneca had that. They said, well, how many times does it feel like, oh, well, it's Pittsburgh, you got to put him in. It's Dallas, you got to put him in. Well, no, it doesn't always work that way.
Well, I think the one interesting sort of more recent trend to look at, right, is we have Jerry Evans from the Saints,
Yep.
who wasn't multi all pro, and along with Martin was on the 2010s all decade team. I was hoping he would make progress, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised in only his second year on the ballot, he's already a finalist.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe some of these voters are getting in their head that guys at that kind of a high level, regardless of position, deserve to be in the room of the 15 that are talked about, because they are on, in his case, right, there aren't a lot of them. Here he is in the case of Jared Evans, the best interior lineman on that ballot. So get him through semifinalist and finalist, and only his second year on the ballot, which means he may sit there for a few more years, I suspect. But he doesn't look like maybe he's going to move at a little bit better clip than Alan Faneca did. And Zach Martin was 7-time first team All Pro. By the way, he ties. Well, he doesn't. Larry Allen has more, but he ties Bob Lilly and Randy White and one other player from the Cowboys who I should know that, who have 7. That's some pretty impressive company. And now I also think, and I haven't really looked around today, I know that PFF didn't even have him on their first or second team at guard. And I've, during the season, hearing a few buzz that people think his game is a little bit below the par, but of course the bar he set for this first 5 years in their career was so high. There might be a tinge of, again, reputation here. He actually, looking at the vote count, he only got 2 more votes than Chris Lindstrom from the Falcons. So it was close in terms of first versus second, which kind of makes me believe that maybe a couple voters move that way. And I would suspect he's 30 or 30. I think he just turned 30 or 31. He's probably going to have a few more years. But if he retired today, he's getting in the Hall of Fame.
And he could
I'm no
become a
doubt about that.
champion, which is something that Jari's got, Kelsey's got.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much they make that a factor. I think it's going to be huge for Whitworth down the road. I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, Evan and I, what did we say? Like, who had the better weekend than Andrew Whitworth? Closed the ceremony as the man of the year, and then less than 24 hours later, he's holding the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's retired.
And then he retires, gets a good job as one of those coveted broadcasters jobs, which don't go to a whole lot of linemen.
And now he's commercials everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, and
Yeah,
all this stuff helps him. It's good on
it's
him.
all part of the picture. I think it is kind of odd sometimes when guys win one Super Bowl. And again, every position's important. It's a team game. They've all contributed to that win. I'm not diminishing it by all, but it is kind of a funny check the box for some of these guys that kind of, and I think as much as it is winning the Super Bowl, I think, Kurt, you hit up on it. It also raises, and again, let's be honest, their PR, their kind of awareness among the voters, right? And if they're media savvy when they're a player or when they're out, it just all kind of adds to the picture and elevates their name in people's minds a little bit. And certainly, I don't think the Cowboys are going to win the Super Bowl, but yeah, that would help. I don't think Zach Martin needs it, but it would certainly be another tick on top of the box.
Certainly doesn't hurt. We'll just go through this one really quickly because, again, it's only a third-year player. His breakout year, right tackle, Penei Sewell of Detroit. Obviously, puts you on the path, but we're certainly not there. So we're going to move on right to defense unless there's any other comments on the offense.
No, it just did a lot of good positive buzz on him this year. I mean, a lot of high accolades. I expect that when we see a lot of these other all pro teams, his name's going to be there. And some teams, some entities don't pick right and left. They just pick 2. And but he's a great young player at a key position. And some speculation that this may be his last year at right tackle.
Oh, really? Okay.
They might decide to move him, flip him over to the left.
Well,
I mean, one thing to see
Yeah.
One thing to see on this list is how many good players the Lions have.
Yes.
For the first time probably in my lifetime. And they've had Barry Sanders, Herman Moore, and a few other people along the time were good. But this is the first time they have like multiple really good players, which is a very good sign for them going forward, which is nice.
And not only a great head coach, a very strong staff.
Mhm.
Now, there's one thing they're missing, in my view, and I think probably some would agree with me, which is what they're going to need, I think, to get them over the top. I don't know whether Jared Goff is the guy to do that. So
yeah,
we'll see. But
Goff had a
do they have a quarterback
Yeah.
in this league? You can win games, you can get into the playoffs, you can win a playoff game or two. But if you want to really in this league, right? Great defense, but you need to have an elite quarterback.
or at least one peaking at just the right time.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to look at the edge here. So we've got two. Myles Garrett, who's just been incredible the last few years. Third first team in the last 4 years. According to Pro Football Reference, he's the highest average player in approximate value with 21 this season. Should join the 100 sack club next year. I'm high on him. He's still got some more work to do.
And
probably defensive player of the year.
I think there's a very good he should.
Yeah.
But
again, if you listen to the odds makers in Vegas.
Yeah.
But here's a question for you guys. How much do you think the situation with swinging the helmet, 3 seasons ago now, matters at this point, honestly? Do you think it matters? Because that was a stain over him for a while. I think it's almost completely forgotten at this point. Would you guys agree?
Yeah. Winning and playing good makes people forget a bunch of things. But we've also seen the cases where sometimes if they've got something against somebody, they'll bring that back up. Cleveland goes the whole distance, which I don't think they will.
Then Cleveland, Detroit, let's go. Cleveland, Detroit, Super Bowl.
That would actually be a lot of fun.
Loser leaves town, Super Bowl. Let's go.
That's right. The battle of Lake Erie.
I think Carolina should have to play somebody just to stay in the league.
Washington, University of Washington, at least University of Michigan.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Yeah, then why not relegation in this sort of thing? I'm all for that in the SEC. Vanderbilt should have been demoted to the Sun Belt years ago. Yeah.
But I also think that I think you alluded to this, Kurt. I think the success that Cleveland has had has only helped. I mean, yeah, he's a great player. He has some great numbers, but again, awareness and success of the team is a factor in this, no doubt. And the way they're playing just elevates. People are looking closer at his game, seeing a lot more, and it just helps kind of move that up. And he's been moving up this sort of tier of edge rushers. And I'll tell you right now, when you look at this list of edge rushers, the depth and quality here. So you have Garrett, and you have T.J. Watt, who led the league in sacks. You got Mikel Parsons, 3rd year in the league, right? And 2 first team, and this is a 2nd team All-Pro. And he's finished. There are very few players who have finished consecutive years back-to-back top 2 defensive player of the year votes. And he may have a 3rd year finishing 2nd. And then you got Max Crosby with the Raiders. You've got Josh Allen with Jacksonville. The list goes on. There's just a wealth of great pass rushers here.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So with JJ, so that's his 4th first team, 3rd sack title if they pay attention to that, and I think they do. Twice tackle for loss leader. Just again, we're talking about 2 players that give offensive coordinators fits. You're planning everything around them. And both of them are still in their peak.
Yep. Yeah. I hope Watt comes back for injury well. He and Laporta were the 2 week 17 injuries. I was like, oh, that sucks for making it that far and then not getting to the playoffs.
Should we go right to the interior linemen? This was a bit of a surprise to me. Nothing against Aaron Donald, who I think might be the greatest Ram of all time, which says a hell of a lot. I had him at number 2. I think he might move up ahead of Merlin Olsen in the list that I do. I thought, though, Chris Jones was better this year. What do you guys think? I mean, I don't have a problem with it. It was a minor surprise to me.
It was a bit of a surprise to me. Again, just sort of listening to the league, and as the
Yeah.
season went on, you certainly heard a lot more buzz around Chris Jones. Part of that, I think, is that he's a very important key player on that particular defense on a high profile, very successful team. Now the Rams, as we know, kind of slow started, stumbled, but really got hot, and here they go. And maybe again, we're looking at the vote count. He got 30. And Jones got 25. So it's close, and maybe there's, again, I don't want to disrespect anybody, but maybe a twinge of a bit of a reputation selection by some of the voters, but his numbers are solid. And for historical perspective here, let's pause for a minute or a second, because 8 time first team All Pro. There are only, including ties, there are only 12 players in NFL history that have more. And of course, they're all in the Hall of Fame, and there is some impressive names on that list. So kudos to him. This is a NFL historical sort of event to see how rare 8 times first team All Pro AP is, and it just goes. And I started seeing some discussion maybe 2 years ago, last year, that he was edging his way on the Mount Rushmore of interior defensive linemen. And that is one impressive historical Mount Rushmore if he can squeeze somebody up, because you're talking about guys like Joe Green and Alan Page and Bob Lilly, and I'm probably missing somebody there. Coming in a minute, but that's, if he can, and people are now seriously talking that he is among the top 4 or 5 best defensive interior linemen in the history of the NFL. So we're seeing something very historical there.
Yeah, first ballot Hall of Famer. He didn't need this.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the people who have at least 8, because there are only 4 players who have more than 8. It's Cherry Rice, Jim Otto, Ron Mix, and Anthony Munoz. That's it. He moves ahead of guys like, well, I don't know, Peyton Manning, Ray Lewis, John Hanna, Forrest Gregg, Otto Graham, some of the absolute all-time greats, with 8. So he's tied with Jim Brown, Don Hudson, Lawrence Taylor, Reggie White, Bruce Smith. We're talking like the cream of the cream in the history of the league. Not just, interior defensive lineman, just on this, he's making a case for the greatest of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. And greatest in this generation already. I think that's a given. Somebody who was unanimous, linebacker Fred Warner. Love this guy. Third first team in 4 years. San Francisco could win the whole thing. How many Hall of Famers could we even have here? Could be a lot.
Hall of Famers from the Niners or Hall of Famers on this list?
On this Niners team.
Well, Brock Purdy. No kidding.
Hey, down the road maybe, but
you never know.
Yeah.
Kittle, McCaffrey, Warner, certainly.
Williams.
I'm sorry.
Williams.
Trent Williams. Yeah, I'm sorry. We just talked about him. I was going back to my list. I knew I'd forgotten. Yeah. So it's entirely possible 4. But yeah, we'll see.
It kind of makes you chuckle when you count how many Pro Football Hall of Fame players were on the 1980s 49ers.
Oh, I know, and they still haven't put in Roger Craig in.
It's a small list, which is kind of, if you just go with the players, it's kind of a surprising for a dynasty. Most dynasties that we're familiar with, right, have several, if not more, and it's just kind of peculiar. Obviously, we mentioned one who definitely deserves to be on that, but even then, it's a pretty small list, and yet you're out. Potentially here, you got 3, maybe 4.
Yeah, but look at you have the Buccaneers, the one-time Super Bowl winning Buccaneers have got 4 on that defense. The Patriots of 2 decades are probably end up with 6 by the time we're done, not including Belichick and Kraft. depending on how you feel about Adam Vinatieri actually getting in. I'd like to think he's getting in, but we'll see.
I would think so.
Yeah, you would think so. He's up. I don't know. It's not next year. It's the year after. Is for Vinatieri.
Yeah, pretty soon.
But-
From here on in, it might go a little bit quicker, only because just the tenure just isn't there.
Mhm.
The other linebacker is Roquan Smith, who is having a phenomenal year. I mean, I'm sure that doesn't make the Bears fans too happy about that, but he could
Yeah.
have your jewelry there. But definitely on a pace, he'll take a giant jump for sure. The other linebacker, I didn't get to see him play too much, so I have to watch a lot more highlights of him. Quincy Williams of the Jets.
Mhm.
Obviously, this is too soon to even sort of put them on the list, but you find the track. You find that Hall of Fame building where you might be able to go. I guess then we're going at the cornerbacks. Who do you think has the brighter future? I think to me it's sort of obvious, but no one had a more record-breaking year. Deron Bland and Sauce Gardner.
Well, I mean, if you look at Sauce, right, this is 2 years.
Yeah, so he's 2 for 2.
2 for 2. And just like we were talking about with Michael Parsons, third year started with 2 and then has a second team. I mean, that's a pretty impressive start. I mean, it's tough to kind of sustain that at some of these positions, but if you want to look at a guy with probably the highest upside and potential, I think Sauce is your guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting about Sauce is he's got to be I did not look this up, but he's got to be the first team All Pro in a very, very long time without a single interception at the cornerback position, which is something Asante Samuel Jr. brought up on Twitter today. But someone else pointed out he paid 438 passing plays, Sauce Gardner. They threw his direction 51 times. He gave up 28 receptions and 1 touchdown in 453 plays. Like they only threw his direction 51 times. That's shutting down. That's Revis Island. That's shutting down your side of the field the whole time. And 51 over 16 games is just over 3 a game. You're throwing in his direction, and the rest of the time, yeah, we're not even involved, right? So even though he has no interceptions, I don't think you hold that against him. I get to see him twice a year. He's fantastic.
Well, he doesn't have the same support that Bland's got, where he's able to get the 5 pick sixes.
Right. So, yeah, it's interesting. Guy with 5 pick sixes and a guy with no interceptions are the 2 guys on the list. So,
that's why you got to look beyond the stats or just the ones that pop out.
Put it this way: I think Sauce Gardner is going to be here 5, 6 more times his career. Yeah. This may be the only time Bland is here, and that's not ripping on him. I just think the reason he's here is replicable.
And I think it's just interesting. 2 very young players, right?
Very young players. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's,
both second year.
You sort of think of quarterbacks, at least I do often, about how better they get with experience and learning a skill set. And there are some veterans further down, but it's kind of unique as well to point out that both these guys are in their second year in the league, I believe. Certainly Gardner is. And kind of shows, and there was a lot of votes. It means it's multiple positions, but a lot of guys got votes, which kind of shows there's a pretty good depth. And of course, the league and the way the game is played kind of drives that. But there's some good quality cornerbacks in the league these days, which probably means that we're going to see rotation of guys in and out. That's why it's one of these things. And I think I'd agree with you. I think Sauce is a guy who's going to continue at a high enough level. We're going to see him on this list again. But quarterbacks tend to rotate. I mean, even some of the greatest cornerbacks of all time don't have a lot of first team All Pro because it ebbs and flows a little bit for a lot of them.
Right.
No, this is something I couldn't remember, and I should have actually done some research on this. Is this the first time they ever allotted slot quarterback before or cornerback? I don't remember this.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah,
because it just seems like a way to honor a third corner, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I thought that was a little unique because I don't ever remember seeing that before. But it's another second-year player in Trent McDuffie of Kansas City. Also sort of illustrates why I don't put sometimes a lot of stock in Pro Bowls because he's not one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I always get a little bit perturbed that they do that before the season's over. But whatever. So again, a little bit too soon. And then same with the safeties. Another sophomore, Kyle Hamilton. Antoine Winfield is a fourth-year player, but also not a Pro Bowler. So obviously, there's a lot more work to do for those three. But out of everyone we talked about, who do we think has taken the biggest jump up?
In terms of they're getting the Hall of Fame out of all these folks?
Like what out of all these players, who took a bigger step up based on adding another first team All Pro? For me, I'll say it's Trent.
I think it's Trent Williams too.
Yeah.
I would agree. Yep. And I think the other guy, although I think he's made a step maybe last year, as I mentioned, as Tark Hill. I mean, I think that's an impressive accomplishment for a receiver to get that many. And as I mentioned before, 2 different teams. I think he's really solidifying his case. But I agree that the 3 consecutive, considering where they sat 3 years ago, Trent Williams has made a huge leap forward in the discussion that he was not in just a few years ago.
Trent Williams, Tyreek is number 1. Tyreek Hill is number 2. Like I said, Tyreek just needs some more counting stats. Yeah. I do think it's important for Lamar Jackson, but not as important as getting another MVP is. Because this is his second first team All Pro. He won the MVP the last time he was first team All Pro. For quarterbacks, they don't really look at first team All Pros as much as they look at MVPs and championships. Yeah. So I think it's good for him, but it's not as big the MVP is going to be way more important for him than this first team All Pro. So, and I honestly think that, I know it's real early, but Sauce Gardner 2 in a row to start his career is a very, very good sign. He gets 3 or 4 in a row. That may literally be all he needs. So, with the way quarterbacks are now. So I know he's only 2 years in, but like I said, I get to watch a lot of Jets football, unfortunately, being in the same division. It's not believe me, my team was worse this year. But Sauce he just pops. Like, you watch that team, he's the best player in the field 95% of the time that he's on the field.
I wasn't gonna, so this is pretty much for regular viewers. We do an elevator up, elevator down. Obviously, all of these people are elevator ups. I just want to do this while Paul's still here, because you might bow out for when we're talking about the people who we lost. Hope you'll stick around, but sometimes it's much later where you are. So I want to throw this out here. Just the drama, and I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think he's going to be. I think he should be. I don't particularly like the guy. I don't know that I want to hang out with him at dinner, but he is the only person I had to have ahead of Aaron Donald in terms of the personal Hall of Fame monitor, and that's Aaron Rodgers. He's getting into it with Jimmy Kimmel, another person I don't particularly care for, which is again neither here nor there. But
there are no winners here.
Sorry,
there are no winners here. So
yeah, seems like we've had that conversation in many things before with that very same tagline. Saying that, it's rubbing a lot of important people the wrong way. And Evan, you and I, we've watched where one person was able to keep Janet Jackson out for a long time because of a certain power. Les Moonves. Obviously, it's a lot different here in the sports hall, because there's certainly more tangible things that we can look at. But this is not going to go away. Aaron is going to get more entrenched, and he's going to piss off more people.
It doesn't matter.
I don't think so either, but I wanted to throw that out there to you both. Is there maybe something that could be happening behind that could? I don't know.
I mean, it's possible that there are a couple of stodgy folks in that room still when he comes up, say 8 years from now. Yeah. And they somehow hold this against them, but no, I don't.
I think the only thing that could change that is sort of the TO thing, where enough teammates thought, okay, you're just too much of a distraction. That hasn't happened with him yet.
Yeah, and I was going to mention TO because I think he's probably the most recent example we have of a guy that the voters decided to ding him. What some would argue was on the field behavior off the field that had an impact on the team, although his teammates don't necessarily agree with that in terms of on the field or in the locker room. But there were at least enough voters that decided to take a shot. And if you recall that the Hall of Fame as an entity and as the voters as a group, because we don't know what individuals voted against T.O., and he had to wait. He didn't get elected till his third year of eligibility.
Third year, yeah.
A guy who many feel is a top 5 all-time wide receiver. We don't really know, but the entity of the Hall and the group of voters got a lot of criticism for that, and there were even well-known, well-spoken voters themselves who said this is ridiculous. We can't. This is not how we should be treating the process. So there's going to be this, but I tend to agree with Evan. I think, unless he goes really off the rails, supportive teammates and coaches, and that's the focus. 8 years down the road, and how much of this is going to play in. You got 50 voters. Maybe there's a few of them that have an axe to grind, but I don't see it being enough. I mean, he's got so many other credentials that can speak for itself. I just don't see a situation where enough voters decide to, on principle or whatever, decide, hey, because of your behavior in the media. And in this case, it's weird because he's an active player and he's in the media every week.
Making
Yeah, I don't
comments
think
on
so.
the
But
network that
I think
broadcasts.
in his overall, what I do think he's going to face, and maybe he doesn't care, maybe he feels it'll work, is if he's thinking about a role in media, mainstream big media, with one of the major networks after he retires. I think this is something that a lot of them were like, we have lots of great options with guys like Brady and other quarterbacks. We don't need to have Aaron Rodgers in our studio or, commentating with a play-by-play guy in the booth on games. And then all of a sudden, he's off on some tangent about some controversy, conspiracy that people don't want to talk about because we're here to learn and listen about football. It may hurt that. I don't think he cares. I think he's here to love to have his own political public podcast kind of entity spewing all this kind of craziness. But in terms of the Hall of Fame, I don't think it's going to make a dent. It'd be in people's minds, but I don't think it's going to make a difference. Like Evan says, we're talking 7, 8 years down the road at this point.
Well, the State Farm didn't renew that contract, did they? Doesn't look like it.
Although I do think that they need to have Fauci on talking about how to read a 3-4 defense. Just because his expertise is about the same. So, yeah. I mean, just think of it that way. If you're like, why is Fauci here reading a 3-4 defense? It's the same reason the other way around. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and it's one of these things where, and he's not the only guy, right? People pointed out, and this has been kind of the jabs that Kimball have taken at him. He's a great football player. He knows the skill. That's what he's good at. These guys get so in focus on their greatness and their ego and how good they are, which is great. So talk football, play football. But then they begin to think they're an expert on everything else in the world. And he's not the only guy doing this. And he's not the only celebrity who does this. But when you start getting, far from your field, but you're using your kind of persona and as an expert in your personality and in your celebrity status, all based on football, to make it sound like you are an authority on this topic here or this topic here, it gets a little annoying, and it is offensive because people spend their lifetime studying science and medicine and these kind of things, and you don't want them telling you how to play as a quarterback, although it's part of what happened to a quarterback. I think he's just sort of digging himself into a lot of different holes that he just isn't.
We're a lot like that.
Well. But it's his thing.
Yeah, I will say this as a Patriots fan. The one thing I've really enjoyed about this is for years I had to hear how Aaron Rodgers is actually a better quarterback than Tom Brady. This has almost entirely put that to bed.
Yep.
Tom Brady is, in my opinion, the greatest quarterback of all time. You want to argue Joe Montana, you want to argue Peyton Manning, you want to argue Otto Graham, a few others, I'll hear it. Aaron Rodgers has never been on that level. Does Aaron Rodgers have more arm talent than Brady? 100%. but Brady's a better quarterback. And I heard for years, particularly out here in the Midwest, that Rodgers was better and Brady, just had the defenses and whatever. But that whole argument seems to have gone to bed this year with
Well, and it will
Rodgers.
because suddenly the conversation, right? You can't even put his name in that conversation because of all this other thing that's swirling around him and the way, and people just don't want to talk about Aaron Rodgers. So he's not even going to be in the conversation, which I don't think he deserves to be in the top 5 conversation. But because people don't even want to talk about this guy, you're right. He's just going to get pushed right to the side of any legitimate NFL conversations. I mean, if he plays next year, which it sounds like he will, obviously he'll be in the conversations in terms of that season, how it plays out. But you're absolutely right. I agree with you, Evan, that who wants to talk about him anymore? About it? He's a good player. He won a Super Bowl. He's got the MVPs. He's in the Hall of Fame. Let's move on. Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear from the guy.
This also works for LeBron James in China. Your opinion on that is null and void. But anywho.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, though. I honestly think I do agree that that there's probably some hit on it. And what I'm about to say is going to sound offensive to Broncos fans. I apologize. But it moves him from the top 5 into the Elway level, which is Elway is an incredibly great quarterback, probably not top 5, if that makes sense. Elway is probably somewhere 8 to 12, 8 to 13, right? Yeah. And I think it solidifies him more in thought in that range than in the top 5 range, which a lot of people were saying. And again, that's not dissing on Elway, who, believe me, I would take Elway over any other quarterback in Patriots history other than Brady. But I just think that's where he is as opposed to.
Oh, come on, Brady. Over Mac Jones.
It's tough. It's a tough decision. I'm hoping we get a 6th-round pick for Matt Jones. Yeah, Mac. I will say this one more thing as a Patriots fan. I think Mac Jones has the ability to be a good quarterback. He was not set up for the opportunity. She had the shortest time period to throw of any player in the league, of any quarterback in the league this year. And when he was up there, he spent more time looking at the rush than at his receivers, who honestly weren't getting open either. He needs to get out of New England to go somewhere, but I do not think Mac Jones' career is over. Okay. I think he has a legitimate shot to maybe be a fill-in, a backup, someone they have a platoon situation. He ends up becoming the starter, whatever. He's just never going to do it in New England. So,
well, and Evan, I really liked your kind of distinguishing between his argument when you're talking about the top 5 quarterbacks of all time. That's a much different conversation, like the way you framed it, than the guys who are 6 to 10 or 6 to 12. It's a big gap there. And I think you articulated it very nicely. It does really sort of, if there was any legitimacy, and I don't buy into it, that Aaron Rodgers was seriously thought as being top 5 all time, that's gone. You push him down. And then he's still in a pretty damn good group, but it is a tier below, and some would argue to the bottom of that tier, but he's in there still. But it's a different discussion, and he's just not in the top 5 discussion. He shouldn't be.
Yeah, and honestly, his years sitting at the beginning of his career mean that his yardage is going to be lower than a lot of his compatriots or contemporaries as well. So 20 years from now, you'll be like, oh my God, Drew Brees had 73,000 yards. Rodgers only had 58, 60. Like, it's going to look very, very different.
But
20 years.
We might change how we look at all that too. With a lot of
it's entirely possible, but like 15,000 yards is 15,000 yards when you're looking at people who were at the same time. I'm just saying, 20 years from now, people who are growing up.
Flacco will still be playing.
The way he's playing, if he wins 2 rounds, gets the AFC Championship game, what happens next year with those Browns? Do they have, because he's a free agent, do they have to re-sign him? And then Watson's the backup, making, I don't know, the GDP of a small Latin American country to sit on the bench? Like, what happens there?
Well, they're going to have to do with extra time, so I'm not too worried about him.
Yeah, the Browns are going to have a real dilemma there. And I think the other point going out, say 10, 15, 20 years, Evan, is if we get a few more quarterbacks with multiple Super Bowls, they then begin to move up that discussion, where our good friend Aaron Rodgers only has 1. Now, granted, he has the MVP seasons, but since the aim here and the voters do put a lot of weight on quarterbacks, especially for winning those Super Bowls, if we get, as you say, if we get 15 years down the road, right, we might, who knows, we might have, 3 or 4 guys might have earned 2 Super Bowls? It's possible.
Yeah. I mean, Flacco, if he wins it this year, somehow has 2 Super Bowls. Stafford, if he wins it this year, has two Super
Yeah,
Bowls.
I mean,
You just absolutely never know. And just by the way, his last MVP season, Rodgers' last MVP season, is one of the most, I don't understand MVP seasons of all time. Every single category he had, Brady was ahead of him, except for
we talked about that too because
he was ahead of him in every category, and somehow Rodgers and had a better record with his team, and somehow Rodgers ended up winning the. I've never understood that one.
Well, he might get it again this year. He has a perfect passing record.
He does. So, and hey, he actually led the league, and most times saying he was coming back to play without doing so. So there you go.
All right. So
that seems to be the thing with former Packers quarterbacks towards the end of their career. So
yeah. But thanks to one former quarterback, I mean, that's where I learned what a dick pic was. I never heard that before. He must because he would have done that in those old flip phone Motorola's. It was so long ago.
True. Anyway, all right. So, is there anything else, Kirk, or can we let Paul go to bed?
I know I might have more I may have more snow to shovel. Better go.
There you go. So I think we'll do that. Paul, thank you so much for joining us and giving your insight. We really appreciate it. And check Paul out in a bunch of shows that are finally going to come out soon. I promise. I'm like 25 shows behind on so many things to do. Because I have this plate and I keep putting more stuff on it. First world problems. A billion people in Africa.
Buchner versus expanding rapidly, sir.
And there's nothing wrong with having all kinds of content in the can, as they say, ready to roll out. So that's great.
It's expanding like my waist, but anyhow.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks.
Take care, Paul. Thank you.
Okay, so we haven't done this in a while, so rather than Evan and I said right before, because usually we have a much longer list, we're gonna shrink that up a bit, just sort of like hit some of the big names that we lost over the last few weeks.
Yeah, and I'll save some of the other ones for some future time. So you're like, hey, I don't know if anyone's actually doing this at home. That'd be kind of weird. But in case anyone's like, hey, what about that person? They're probably coming up in a future week.
Yep.
But I will start with at one. We've only lost one person to the Beige Mistress.
Okay.
Yola Zabo, who I think I may have mentioned, passed away at the age of 79. Competed in men's bantamweight event in the 1968 Summer Olympics.
In boxing?
Boxing.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have another boxer. Hold on, I just had it. There he is. Also passing away, Rolando Garbi. And if this will load, there we go. Gold medalist in light middleweight at the Pan American Games 67, 71, and 75. But also won the inaugural 1974 World Championships of boxing. So he's he was world champion in the light middleweight division in boxing. He passed away at the age of 76. He is from Cuba. From just going through some quick famous people who passed away. Glynis Johns. What's Glynis Johns best known for? She was 100. What's her most famous role?
I don't know.
The mom from Mary Poppins back in 1960.
Never seen it.
Oh God, I've seen that movie more than any other movie in my life because it's my sister's favorite movie, and they always put it on, and I had to watch it with her. Okay. So I can do that thing all the way through. But the mom from Mary Poppins passed away at the age of 100. Also passing away, Gaston Glock. Do you know what he invented?
The Glock gun?
That's correct. The handgun. Okay. He passed away at the age of 94.
A gunshot?
No.
Okay.
No, not a gunshot. Just old age, I guess. For something that was very important to my wife, so I want to make sure I mention it. B.J. Carter from the House of Carters became the third of the Carter siblings to pass away. There are only 5 of them. She passed away at the age of 41.
Who are they?
As in Aaron Carter, Nick Carter,
Oh,
from Backstreet Boys and all that stuff. So Leslie Carter died at 25, Aaron Carter died at 34, BJ Carter died at 41. So only Angel and Nick remain. So yeah. We'll come back to that one. That was pretty important. Bobby Rivers from the Food Network. I don't know if you ever watched any of his stuff. He did the Top 5 show. He passed away at the age of 70. He also had a celebrity talk show on VH1 back in the day. I don't know if you ever watched his show there.
right now, Evan, if it's not sports, I don't know anything. Even then, it's debatable what I know.
One of my favorite actors, Tom Wilkinson, passed away at the age of 75.
Yeah.
I loved him. So my wife and I, during our project of all the movies ever been nominated for Best Picture, one of the ones we knew nothing about before we watched was In the Bedroom, which he has to star in Roland Tom Wilkinson. That movie was fantastic, and he was absolutely incredible in it. If you have not seen In the Bedroom, I highly recommend you go see it. There's also, of course, in the Name of the Father, Sense and Sensibility, Rush Hour, Shakespeare in Love, The Patriot. He was Cornwallis in The Patriot, so sort of the main bad guy.
Yeah, that's where I remember him most.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Batman Begins. There are a whole bunch of them. Michael Clayton. He was amazing in Michael Clayton. If you've never seen that one,
Never
yeah,
not.
he was always good. That's a good way of saying he was never not good. But he passed away at the age of 75 at the end of last year. Also passing away, Cindy Morgan, Lacey Underall in Caddyshack.
What? I missed that.
Yeah, and also Laura / Yori in Tron.
What'd she die of? She couldn't be that old.
She was 69.
Really?
Yep. So she passed away. She was passed away of natural causes, last seen alive on December 19th, found in her home on December 21st.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought she would have
passed
been
away
10 years younger than that, but no, that
Caddyshack was a long time ago, my friend.
Yeah, I forget that. Only because I probably watch at least twice a year.
Yeah. Also passed away, James McCaffrey. I probably knew him best as the main character on Rescue Me. Did you ever watch Rescue Me? It's a Dennis Leary joint, so I'm a big fan of Dennis Leary. But he died of multiple myeloma at the age of 65. He's also the voice of Max Payne from all the video games he ever played.
Okay, I know that.
Yeah, so he was 65. Also passing, David Soul.
Don't give up on this baby.
Don't give up on this baby. Also, Hutch from Starsky and Hutch. He passed away at the age of 80.
That might be one of my favorite 70s, not show necessarily, but just like the opening.
Yeah, the opening of that is awesome.
Plus
it inspired the Sabotage video from the Beastie Boys, so they get extra credit for that.
Yeah.
We also lost a Nobel laureate, Robert Solow, of one of the most important people in economics. He passed away at the age of 99. But the one celebrity I want to talk about the most here, Tom Smothers, passed away the day after Christmas at the age of 86. Now, the Smothers Brothers, to younger people, if you listen to their stuff now, you're like, oh, this is not particularly edgy. I think you don't understand how important that the Smothers Brothers hour was back when it was on the air. There was a video that was circulating after passed away. He and his brother and oh shoot, I can't remember his name. He also passed away earlier this year. But they did I can't think of his name. It'll come to me in a second. They did a song on how to dodge the draft in the middle of Vietnam. And it was like kind of a happy-go-lucky, here's how I got out of things. And they were one of the most popular shows on television and still got canceled.
Yeah, they were counterculture, and I think they were able to get away with a lot more because when you looked at those two, even back then, They look like your accountants.
Yeah, 100%. Particularly his brother. It's so weird to see like the early stuff with his brother without the mustache. So I always think of him wearing with the mustache
Yeah,
so much. But it was I don't want to either over or underestimate the importance of Smothers Brothers, but without the Smothers Brothers, there is no Laugh-In, there may be no SNL. They set America ready for avant-garde comedy on TV because there was nobody like them before they came.
Mhm.
And Tom Smothers passed away at the age of 86. He was also famously the last guest of on the last episode of Johnny Carson, that Smothers Brothers were there, where he was imitating Johnny on his last show, pissing Johnny off, honestly, like good naturedly. But Johnny had a little bit of a you could piss Johnny off streak, and Tom was getting under his skin, and that's also amazing if you haven't seen it before. Yeah, he passed away at the age of 86. That's why I spent a lot of time on Tom Smothers.
Mhm.
There's lots of other people here. I'm going to spend most of the rest of my time here on. Well, I want to bring this one too. Benjamin Kiplagat passed away. Ugandan long distance runner, was stabbed to death in his car.
Yeah.
People just tried to rob him. He gave the stuff up, and then they still stabbed him to death. Passed away at the age of 34. One of those guys who has done a whole bunch of races. If you watch any of the international competition, I'll watch track sometimes. Yeah, it's just awful. He 34 years old, robbed in his car. In the same area where multiple other people have been robbed.
Was he still competing? Because at 34, that's not that old for middle distance.
No, he was still going. Hadn't won any real medals since 2019.
Okay.
It'd been a few years, but he was back. He's basically training in a high altitude area. But the athletes have been going there. I think it's the third one who has died in the last 3 or 4 years of violent death while they've been there. So they're going to need to figure out what's happening with that. Greg Boster, ski jumper in the 1994 Olympics for the U.S., later a banker at J.P. Morgan Chase, passed away at the age of 55. Also very important, he was the president of the U.S. ski and snowboard teams for quite a while. So the rest I want to really talk about here are all racing. I'll do one more. I'll just do baseball. Ryan Miner passed away. Do you remember Ryan Miner?
I feel like I
Played
should.
with Orioles and Expos.
Maybe I don't. Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else.
Yeah, he passed away at the age of 49. He passed from colon cancer. He had just actually, the Oklahoma State Sports Hall of Fame elected him as a 2024 inductee just a few weeks before he passed. But yeah, he was only 49 years old. All right, everyone else I'll do is motorsports.
Okay.
Starting with Tim Steele. Won 3 ARCA national championships. Member of the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame back in 2009. Won the ARCA championships in 93, 96, and 97. ARCA Rookie of the Year in 1993. Finished in the top 10 on NASCAR Xfinity Series twice. But yeah, he passed away at the age of, hold on a second. Sorry, my computer just moved everything the wrong way. He passed away at the age of only 55. I don't see from what. Yeah, it was just a couple days ago. The fastest woman on wheels, Paula Murphy, passed away at the age of 95, which is a pretty good run for being the fastest woman on wheels. She was the first woman to drive a jet engine car on the salt flats.
Oh, wow.
The first woman licensed to drive a nitromethane fueled car, and the first woman to have a funny car license from the National Hockey Association.
Unfortunately, she did this all with the left blinker on.
That's a good thing about the salt flats. You get nothing to go into. Yeah, she is.
Send your hate mail to me on that one. Sorry.
Yeah, I try to walk by. Um, but she's she drove a Studebaker in 1963, 19 on the Indy track, which set the record for women in a track also as well. So probably one of the I mean, not even probably, one of the great early pioneers of women's racing, Paula Murphy, passed at the age of 95. Um, Also passing away, another drag racer, Roland Young, the uh, the the guy who created the Hawaiian brand cars. Um, Also crew chief in a whole bunch of funny car races.
Hawaiian
He
brand
passed.
car? What is that?
I'm sorry.
What Hawaiian brand car?
The Hawaiian brand car. So it's a. Do you watch much drag racing?
Not really, no. But that's a type of that's a type of
It's a type of car. It's a type of drag racing. There's some variation of what type of car you can use. We've now gotten more
okay. So it's like
standardized.
one of those set divisions, I guess.
It's part of the hot rod ride that you can do, but it's a separate. It's hard for me to describe.
No,
It's
yeah, but
it's
like
one
like a
it's the one
different
ones we
class.
can.
Like the car is
Yes,
just built differently. I can wrap my head around that.
right. So he passed away at the age of 78. And then the two big ones to talk about here.
Hmm.
Let's start with Gil de Ferran. He passed away at the age of only 56. He had been racing with his son and was not feeling well and ended up having a heart attack while driving. Um, was a 2000 and 2001 Champ Car champion, driving for Penske, won the 2003 Indianapolis 500, runner-up of the 2009 Le Mans Series, had 31 races on IndyCar, won 5 times, 129 starts in the Kart FedEx Championship Series, winning 7 times, Rookie of the Year in Kart in '95. An all-around, well-respected and well-loved guy in racing. There was an outpouring of grief when he passed away. But yeah, he was, I mean, particularly only the age of 56. Seemed like he had a long time
Yeah.
left. In 2013, he was named as one of the 50 greatest drivers to have never raced in Formula One.
Oh, okay.
But he's, um,
That's still pretty impressive.
yeah. So yeah, he passed away. 56 is far, far too young. So, and lastly, I want to bring up one of the winningest racers in the history of NASCAR, a member of the third class in NASCAR Hall of Fame, Cale Yarborough, passed away at the age of 84, won the 76, 77, and 78 Winston Cup Series, 84 IROC Cup Series, won the Daytona 500 in 68, 77, 83, and 84. Won Talladega in Talladega 585, Winston 500 winner in 78 and 84. Still holds the record for most poles in a season in the modern era. He had 14 poles in the 1980 season, which is still a record. Most popular driver in the Grand National Series in 67, member of the International Motorsports Hall of Fame, the National Motorsports Press Association Hall of Fame, Motorsports Hall of Fame of America, member of the Court of Legends of the Charlotte Motor Speedway, one of NASCAR's 75 greatest drivers, one of his 50 greatest drivers. Like, there's pretty much nothing you can say. 83 wins, 319 top tens, 69 poles in his career. There are very, very few drivers in the history of the sport who could come close to what Cale Yarborough did on the track. I mean, you got Petty, Gordon, and a few others, but I mean, Cale Yarborough is no worse than the fifth greatest driver in the history of NASCAR.
Yeah, if I remember right, he was racing for a long, long time after his peak was over. He was still, a bankable star, still very capable of winning a race at any time, even well into his 40s, I believe.
Yeah, I'm trying to see his first race was 1957, the Southern Open in 1957. His last race was the Atlanta Journal 500 in 1988.
Oh, okay.
So that's
Still going after that.
that's still 31 years. 88, he would have been 49 when that ended. But I mean that's the end of his NASCAR career. He was still racing other places.
Right.
So last run for there. But Cale Yarborough was 84. One of NASCAR's absolute greatest drivers. I have all sorts of other sports and musicians and stuff like that, but we'll save them. We'll get everybody else in later weeks.
All right, sounds good. So with that, I don't have an elevator so much. I mean, I could sort of throw Chris Jericho as an elevator down. If you're interested in what his bad week, there are far better people who can explain it than I. Long story short, he was sort of drunk tweeting, and it kind of came out, or at least it's believed that he might be responsible for sexual assault.
Oh, good.
If that's true, and I have no idea whether it is or isn't, but the belief is that it was sort of swept under the rug from an NDA, where he's at his current employer, All Elite Wrestling. So I say elevator down for the WWE Hall of Fame, which he certainly is worthy by every metric. Of course, if they started looking at ethics, then, well, yeah.
You can do that with pretty much any Hall of Fame. They start looking at ethics. I do have to say, elevator up for this week. Interesting, just because we're getting the results of some of the votes here for the Pro Baseball or Baseball Hall of Fame. Right now, I would say we're going to have a class of 3 pretty solidly.
Looks like
we may have a class of 5, and that 5th person in last year of eligibility is Gary Sheffield. And
I don't see it, but I'd be happy.
Hold on. Yeah, here's what I'll say about that. I don't think Gary Sheffield's going to get in. I think he's going to end up above 70%, though. And being above 70% is higher than Clemens or Bonds got.
That is true.
So that's good for his long-term prognosis. But if he does get in, let's just say I'm wrong, and there's a whole influx of people who don't publish stuff online, and he ends up getting into the Hall of Fame, that is very good for McGuire, Clemens, Bonds. Probably not Palmer. I think Palmer was screwed just because of his pointing the finger thing.
Yes.
But Sosa, again, I don't know about Sosa because he's become weird. But like Bonds, Clemens, and McGuire, how do you keep Bonds, Clemens, and McGuire out if Sheffield is in? And you can honestly say the same thing with David Ortiz or Bagwell or Piazza or Ivan Rodriguez or a whole bunch of other people. People have wondered or have proven to take something. Like how do you keep them out? We'll see. I think Sheffield's gonna end up just short. If he had 15 years, like they used to, I think he gets in.
Well, I'll maintain my conspiracy theory. They wanted to rush those PED guys out, which is why
it's 100% what they wanted. Yeah, I mean, there were too many people wanted to vote for. So instead of expanding the number of votes people could have, because you're limited to 10, they shorten the time period to get people off.
Yeah.
So, and the first person affected by that, and I said it was actually good for him, honestly, at the time, was Fred McGriff. McGriff was the first one off, and I said he probably gets in just about the same time.
Yeah, you said that multiple times. Yeah.
Yeah, I said that him getting knocked off sucks, but he'll get in the first time because now you'll see he's got 400. He had 493 home runs. He had the same number of home runs as Lou Gehrig. And if the 94 strike doesn't happen, he has 500 and he was in second, third ballot latest, right?
Yeah, you just went in with the wrong hat.
Yeah, we'll talk to Andre Dawson about
that. That's right, yeah.
You really want to
do you have a good, the bad and ugly for the week, or?
Yeah, I can do something quickly.
No, not to put you on the spot there.
No, that's good. We'll start with the bad. It happened tonight. Jack, I was paying attention to you. We talked a few weeks ago about how the Bulls had set up the Ring of Honor. Well, the Ring of Honor announcement was tonight, and Jerry Krause came up, the architect of those Bulls 6 championships in the 90s. He passed away 2-3 years ago at this point, and so his widow was there, and there are a large number of members of the crowd who booed when Jerry Krause came up. 2 rules. 1, don't boo anyone going into your Ring of Honor. Now, I say this as a Patriots fan, and if the Patriots ever decide to put Parcells in because the fans will never elect him, that may very well happen. But just no, don't do that. Particularly in front of his widow. You're better than Chicago. I live here. Oh, sort of. I live 45 minutes outside of. It's your Ring of Honor. Put it aside. Cheer nicely. Don't have to cheer super loud, but don't boo the guy. First of all.
Yeah.
So that's my bad. The ugly. I still gotta have to say that the Carolina Panthers situation with their ownership. He is the new Daniel Snyder for the league. He has taken over that role. They fined him $250,000, or it's $300,000. So throwing a drink at some fans who are booing him. But that Carolina Panthers situation, they went 2-15. They traded up for the wrong quarterback, it's looking like, in the first round last year. And now their number 1 pick is going to the Bears. Although apparently I saw a report today that Caleb Williams wants confirmation that the Bears won't pick him, or that they're going to trade the pick because he doesn't want to come to Chicago.
I don't blame him.
And will stay another year in college if the Bears try and take him.
Yeah, where quarterbacks go to die.
Yeah. So we shall see what happens with that. I mean, yeah, we shall see what they decide to do with it. I mean, they could probably trade back to 4 and end up with Marvin Harrison Jr. and be pretty happy with their draft out of the whole thing. Trade back to 4, have 4 and 8, pick up, Marvin Harrison Jr., Joe Alt, and then get another first-round pick probably sometime in the future if that's what they wanted to do, and keep Fields. But that Carolina situation, I'm not sure there's a worst run franchise in sports. And that's saying.
That's why I wasn't planning playoff viewing when I knew everything depended on Carolina beating Tampa. So anyway, that's not.
Yeah. But again, this can get turned around. 2 years ago, I would have said the same thing about the Texans, and I think I did say the same thing about the Texans. Yep. And now 2 years later, they have a quarterback, they have a coach who knows what the heck he's doing, and they're in the playoffs. By the way, this is the first time since 2012 where we've had a rookie quarterback and a rookie head coach take the team to the playoffs.
Oh, is it? Okay, that's awesome.
Can you name that team in 2012 that had a rookie quarterback and a rookie head coach?
Nope. Let's see. Well, maybe I should try.
I'll give you a hint. The rookie quarterback has been retired for several years now. He was very good, but retired early.
Oh, okay. That makes me think of Andrew Luck then.
That's correct quarterback.
I'm blanking on who his coach was. It wasn't Reich, was it?
Chuck Pagano.
Oh, Pagano, that's right, yeah.
It was Pagano and Luck in 2012 was the last time a rookie head coach, a rookie quarterback. Because that comes up with the Patriots, now that we have a rookie head coach and what's looking like probably a rookie quarterback coming up. Although maybe we'll have Joe Flacco. Who knows? And finally, I'm going to go to my Patriots for the good.
Oh, okay.
I know we finished 4-13, and this is the worst team record since 1991 or 92. Excuse me, I had 90, which I can't even remember. The one season we were 1-15. Yeah, we started the season 1-1, and then lost the next 14 games. Now that was back with the AFC East. All the teams beat the same teams over and over again. The Dolphins always beat the Bills. Bills always beat the Patriots. Patriots always beat the Colts. Colts always beat the Jets, and the Jets always beat the Dolphins. It was like a big circle. We went 1-15.
I went all too well with the NFC South for many years. But yes.
So we went 1-15, but we beat the Colts in that second game that year. And then we went 2-14 the next year. In 92. So that was a worse team for them. I honestly think these teams are significantly better than those Patriots teams. Our defense actually was number one in rushing. They were for a team that was behind a lot. They held opponents to 3.1 yards a rush, which was the best in the entire league. And they did it without their two best defensive players. I honestly think we had an average quarterback. They win at least 7, maybe 8 games this year. That said, this had an opportunity to be ugly with Belichick leaving.
Yeah.
It really did.
It was classy the way they sort of like worded it. Well, I mean, obviously they said they allowed it to say mutual. I think we all know that necessarily wasn't the case, but it was.
I actually not sure. I'm not having seen it now because I was on record saying I thought Belichick was going to coach next year. But having seen some of the stuff that's come out, I actually think it might have been mutual.
Think so?
Yeah, it appears.
Either way, it was a beautiful thing to watch because I did watch it.
Yeah. And the reason I say that is it appears that because Gerard Mayo, our new coach, who's now the youngest coach in the league,
So
finally
that's
taking.
official?
Yep.
Okay.
So finally took over from McVay. McVay was the youngest coach in the league for 5 seasons. But Gerard Mayo is 38. So he's not the youngest coach in the league. But when he signed last year, the Panthers tried to get him in for a coaching interview. He said no and re-signed with the Patriots. He signed a contract through 2024, which guaranteed him that he would be Belichick's successor, which makes me think that Belichick was going to do this year and next, and then leave in that situation 25 seasons. And seeing how bad the team was this year and that he wants to get to the record. He needs 15 more wins for House.
Yeah.
But it's 15 more, I'm sorry, for Shula.
For Shula, yeah.
He needs to pass Howells and Shula. That's going to take him 3 or 4 seasons here. He's going to be 73 years old.
Yeah.
At some point, you're going to be done. So he's got one more go round at, 4 or 5 years, and he's going to be done. He's not going to get that in New England. We're going to rebuild him. We need a new QB. We need everything else. He doesn't want to go through that again. Right. He's going to go someplace, like we said earlier, if Dallas fires McCarthy, if they don't do well, he'll go to the Chargers. He'll go somewhere like that has a ready-made quarterback, at least a competent quarterback, and try and build around there to get himself there. I honestly think that it ended up being more mutual than otherwise. I think it was just a year early. Like Belichick looked at the situation. It was like, I'm not going to get there. And Kraft is like, I'm 84 years old. How much longer am I going to wait to have a team? You know what I mean? And it just, they went their separate ways. But it was in Mayo's contract guaranteeing that when Belichick left, he was a success.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why it happened so quickly. And they got around the Rooney Rule because this was a pre-existing thing and he's African-American. This is like the 3rd or 4th time it happened in the history of the league. When Tony Dungy left and I can't think of his name, who took over, who was also later coached Jim Caldwell. Jim Caldwell, they did it there when Dungy left. A few other places like that. So I just like the way it was handled. The Patriots could have I thought the Patriots, if they were going to get rid of him, were going to hold on and look for some draft compensation because he was still under contract. But they just decided rather than make it nasty, hey, we had the greatest run of an ownership and coach in the history of the league. And again, Shula has more wins, but he had multiple owners. But in terms of ownership and coach, this is the greatest run in the history of the NFL, other than, Hallis owning the team. And there's no need for acrimony. He's going to go his 4 or 5 years, wherever he ends up going. And then 6 years from now, he'll be back. They'll waive the waiting period for the Patriots Hall, and they'll just put him
as
directly and everything. It could have gone so badly. It was a terrible year. His last game, he lost to the freaking Jets 17-3, in which he had a drive where his quarterback somehow threw 2 interceptions on the same drive. Do you know how hard that is?
It's right up there with I guess when you're sort of batting and then you get on base from a ball 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just,
one of those
he
weird
just,
things that can happen. Yeah.
he threw an interception, they fumbled, he got it back and threw an interception that looks almost identical the very next play.
Yeah.
So it's just a terrible way for him to go out. I thought we were going to win that game because we always beat the Jets. Last time the Jets beat us was 2015.
What was it, a 15-game win streak? I
Yeah.
understood. Yeah.
So of all the teams to go out against, but just what was accomplished and this whole narrative, Rex Ryan saying that it was all Brady. I'm sorry, Rex.
Or did he say that? I missed that.
Yeah, he said that Belichick is terrible and it's clearly all Brady. Brady would never say that. They needed each other at the beginning of Brady's career. Those first 3 Super Bowl wins, Brady was competent, not an all-star, right? Those were carried by McGinnis and Bruschi and Marvin Harris, not Marvin, and Rodney Harrison and all the Richard Seymour and Ty Law and that defense that was so freaking good is the reason those Patriots won those first 3 Super Bowls, right? 2006 is when Brady started becoming Brady, but he had terrible wide receivers. 2007, they gave him Wes Welker and Randy Moss, and then he really became the Brady that we know. Those first 6 years, that entire team was Belichick. And the whole thing I used to hear was, Brady had all these great defenses and Aaron Rodgers never did or Peyton Manning never did or whatever. And now that he's had hasn't had a competent quarterback in a while. I mean, he's had Cam Newton, a rookie Mac Jones who's okay, a sophomore Mac Jones who had a defensive coordinator as the offensive coordinator and screwed everything up, and then a guy who had no offensive line this year. He hasn't had a real quarterback in 4 years, and the team hasn't done well.
Yeah.
But I'm just glad it didn't go as poorly as it could.
It very well could have. That's an excellent good. Okay,
Yes.
so I guess we'll wrap that up. Check out more things in the Buchnerverse. So many other shows, so many things that are coming up. Lots of interviews that I've been doing lately. I put up a couple more, and a lot of them are sort of like baseball related too. So that's been a lot of fun. Talking to some baseball bloggers regarding their take on the Hall of Fame. Actually, I talked to that's going to come up soon. A gentleman named Tom Murphy, a baseball writer, or actually a sports writer for Die Hard Boston Sports. So,
cool.
Yeah, we discussed.
A guy named Murphy writing for Boston Sports. Well, wonders never see.
There you go. So we talked about who he thinks should be the next Red Sox in the Hall, next Patriot in the Hall. I didn't want to talk Bruins because he's still upset about that. But he lives in Connecticut, so he's more of a Whaler guy. So he sort of like turned his back on the NHL. I get that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I still think they should bring back Brass Bonanza, but I also think that the Carolina Hurricane should not be able to use Whalers uniforms. So
it's a weird thing to sort of see, isn't it, when they do those retro things every now and then.
Come on, the greatest goal song in the NHL, but we need to bring it back somewhere. All hail the whale. Also one of the coolest logos ever.
They are. Sorry,
tail.
Sorry about that weird edit. That little bouncing dog that was showing up from there, she was having a little accident. So Winnie says hello. So that's sort of like take care of that. Maybe that might have been Winnie's commentary on something. But yeah, there's going to be so much other stuff coming on the site. So much so that before I was telling Evan just how I'm kind of overwhelming myself, but it's a good problem to have. With that, wherever you are, wherever you may be, make it a great day because it's not going to come again. Easy for me to say.
Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye.